Hello, everyone. I'm Cheryl Crooks, Executive Director of Cascadia International Women's Film Festival. I welcome you here today for our special conversations with our directors of the film Number 3, Normandy Lane. But first, I need to thank our sponsors, particularly the City of Bellingham, Whatcom County, and the Mary Redmond Foundation, and this year's major media sponsor, KCTS Television and Crosscut Magazine. Without any of our sponsors, this would not have been possible, so we especially want to thank all of them. Today's sponsor for the film Number 3, Normandy Lane is Barry and Debbie Myers, and we want to thank them too. Today's interview will be with Brenda Strong, the director of Number 3, Normandy Lane, and her husband, John Farmanesch-Bocca, who wrote and is also in the film, and Sheila Goodwin, who is on the Cascadia board and a licensed therapist. You may also recognize her from her recurring roles on The X-Files, will lead the conversation. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for supporting Cascadia.
Hi, Brenda and John.
Hi, Sheila.
Hi. I was wondering if we could start with your doing like a little synopsis of the film for our listening audience.
Sure. Number 3, Normandy Lane is a story about a young Army wife and mother whose life is inextricably altered when a series of visitors arrive at her door. It's based on a true program that a lot of families in the U.S. Employ in order to connect with their servicemen or women overseas. And so there's a little bit of a surreal quality to it because these servicemen and women are in the form of a cardboard cutout that the families get to have in their homes while their serviceman is away, particularly for young children who may forget what mom or dad looks like if they have long stints of time between when they get to see them when they're serving overseas. So this was in place right around 2007, 2008.
Yeah, they began during the Iraq War during stop loss, where they'd have these ridiculously long tours of duty, and Army wives started to create life-size cardboard cutouts of their spouse so that the babies and the young children at home would not forget what the parent looked like. So when they would come back off the transport, they'd reach for daddy as opposed to cower away and start.
Right.
So that's what the story is.
So it was actually started by the wives. It wasn't started by the military.
Correct, but then it was
Okay.
it's kind of it became pretty commonplace for a while. But as civilians, people don't really know about these things, and we actually we did a couple of short films based on the things that are little known about military life that average civilians have no idea. You know,
Right. I had no idea. And when I watched the film, you made a very specific choice by not putting the thing up in the beginning of the film. You do to the end about the surrogate program. So when I watched it, I thought the whole thing was made up. You know, it was until I read the very ending. So John, you wrote the script. How did that come about? And also, how did you get brought into it, Brenda? And what was it like to collaborate? And did the script change as you worked on it?
Yeah. Well, the idea from it came when I was fortunate enough to go to Juilliard, and while I was there, I was writing a series of short stories of things I might want to do for film in the years to come, because I was there as a directing fellow. Mm-hmm. And this was one of the stories I stumbled onto with a writing partner of mine who pointed this article out to me about what the families were doing this was back in 2004, what they were doing to cope. And I just thought it was fascinating and bizarre, and I wrote this story. And then a movie came out called Lars and the Real Girl. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, I thought, well, they did it in that movie, so I put it aside.
Right.
Only to come back to it years later and go, well, obviously it's not only nothing like Lars and the Real Girl, but the fact that this is really happening, and there's a whole human story here that I guess I'm not really touching on. And so I made it as part of my short stories about military life and just seeing it from a different angle that most people don't have. My father was a general in the Air Force. My brother is a lieutenant colonel. My mom taught languages at the Defense Language Institute. So I have an entire family.
Military, yeah.
I grew up on Rockland Air Force Base in San Antonio, but I'm the weirdo artist.
Actually, a lot of John's other pieces are based on either classic or modern war tales. So it wasn't too far of a stretch for him to start to explore these in film. And it was actually during his short film editing process, I Did Not Forget You, which is about a man returning home from war to try to reconnect with family.
Mm-hmm.
We were editing and he told me this story and I went, why didn't we do that film?
Wow.
And he said, well, that's what you want to hear when you're editing your first short.
Well, how did it turn out then that you made it your directorial debut and John, you didn't choose to direct it?
Well, I had always intended to direct it, and I Did Not Forget You, the previous film, did very well. We won a number of audience awards, and it had a great festival run. About 15 film festivals, 9 nominations, 7 wins. I mean, I don't mean to brag about it. I'm just going to say how
Brag. That's okay.
this has dwarfed it because it's won even more awards because of my lovely wife's directing ability. And she wanted to make her directing debut. She was trying to decide what to do as a short film. And I remembered her reaction from that editing session. I said,
I burst into tears when he told me the story.
So I said, do you want to direct? I'll write it for you to direct. And so it was a kind of a gift, which
it was a gift. Wow.
Turned around and gifted me back by making it so beautiful. So
what, I mean, all the years of acting, but what really prepared you for being able to direct?
You know, it's so funny because I know a lot of actors who are just chomping at the bit to get into the director's chair. And I would like to say that that was me, but it quite honestly wasn't. Up until I had an opportunity to shadow during Dallas, when I was doing the series Dallas. John was shadowing season 2 directors. And he decided to do I Did Not Forget You there in Dallas. And we used a lot of our crew. And because he was in every frame of that film, he couldn't be the director in so much as be behind Video Village and watch kind of the shots and how they were set up and everything else. And so he asked both myself and Thomas Marchese, who's been a producer on both of our films, to kind of sit behind the monitors at Video Village and let him know whether or not, you know,
be my eyes.
Yeah, to be his eyes. And he would and you know, based on our reactions, he would know if he needed another take or not. Because if we were sitting there going, okay, we're going again.
I know these two people so well that I really didn't even need to talk with them. If I did, I'd call them over, but I would finish a take and I'd just look behind camera. And if there was kind of an up energy, I'm like, great, we're moving on.
Right.
Yeah.
But quite honestly, like you said, Sheila, you know, you're an actress, you know.
Yeah.
You know as an actor what works for you and what doesn't work for you when a director approaches you. And so, you know, I have to say, just being an actress for 30 plus years, you know how important it is to set the tone for an actor to do their work. And so I learned as much from directors I didn't enjoy working with as I did enjoy working with. So
I mean, she's had 10,000 plus hours on set in a long career spanning everything from sci-fi to evening drama to comedy, from Seinfeld to
but it's still different than having the visual concept that she has. And I also, your editor, did he, or your cinematographer, did he help you with the?
Carlos Gonzalez, who's wonderful. I would work with him again in a heartbeat. The thing that made Carlos and our relationship, or my relationship, really sing was he loves women and he loves empowering women. And so he never overstepped. And he has directed before as well. And he works with kids a lot. So he was kind of the perfect ingredient in our team of friends who have worked together before. And he was unknown to me. He actually came in through Linda Leifer, who was my script supervisor on Desperate Housewives, who did this short as well. And she said, I've worked with Carlos, he's wonderful. And so, you know, we had a conversation. First of all, he read the script and really responded to it, which, you know, is always the thing that you want with your DPs, that they start to see it. He was a little disappointed because we were shooting in Marina, California, which has these beautiful sand dunes and all of this beautiful access to the beach. And I'm like, no, this is inside the house. We don't see a lot of
That's right. This is an inexpensive shoot.
This is actually just outside my old hometown in Central California. It's the former Fort Ord that we shot on, that Clint Eastwood was stationed at.
It almost looks like the Truman Show. With everything lined up and your American flags on everywhere.
Exactly.
But some of the things that I was so impressed with for a directorial debut was some of the incredible visual choices that you made. The freeze frames in the supermarket, the hand when after she finishes trying to put the fire out and you see her hand gripping the sink. The stories told through behavioral motion, the fact that you never hear her cry, that this one incredible choice after another from a debut director, I find amazing. So,
thank you. It's interesting because it is a collaboration, and you know, John's very famous for saying the best idea wins. And so I can't claim that all of those were my ideas, but you recognize it when you see it. And so you know that it captures the right emotional dynamic for that particular scene. The irony that you bring up the supermarket scene, because John, as a writer, you know, he learned something in the translation of that, because in his mind, that's what he saw was kind of that Americana frozen. Of the PTSD of all of these going through this. And, you know, in my mind, when I first read the script, I saw that long tracking shot of just going frame by frame, of seeing all of these women kind of in different tableaus. And so I thought I completely captured that, you know, kind of feel, but the women were moving and they were just kind of interacting. And John came and went, why are they moving? They're supposed to be frozen. And as soon as we did it, I was like, oh my God, that's so much better. That's just so much better.
Yes.
It tells the story. And, you know, the gift of our collaboration is we've both been at this for over 30 years. Him from the artistic director of a theater company side and me from the acting side. And so wherever either one of us have shortcomings in whatever capacity, the other one lifts them up with their experience. So
I gotta say, because she's being modest about, look, yes, you take all the best ideas on set, but if your name is the director at the end, it's yours because you chose one way or the other. So those are, in my opinion, her choices because she chose to keep them. Yeah.
So talking about choices, the directing and the acting of the scene, your scene as Captain Coleman, is such a fine line between the empathy of the man and the strictness of the military. And in both your scenes, you're kind of locked in that, especially like in the last scene when you have to come with the two thugs, in case she doesn't want to go because the military works on a clock. What was that like to do that fine line between I got to get her out of here and oh my God, look at this basket case.
Great direction helps. It doesn't always, just because you're an actor doesn't mean you can direct actors. I refuse that whole trope. It doesn't exist. Because you can then only speak to actors who act like you. I mean, but what Brenda does is speak the 50 to 150 languages that different actors have. And we were going for both. I mean, I tried to write it in that tone, and Brenda directed me toward that tone. We did takes where I was more on the strict side, more on the pathetic side. Sometimes we can cobble it together in editing so that we get both. Some takes straight through. I high-wired that line.
Right.
We didn't want to make the military the bad guy, because that's not the point at all. But things have to proceed in life, right?
Right.
And to have that double bind that particular character was in, I thought was a nice detail to the main story, because the main story, it's her story. I mean, it's Sarah's story. But as the heavy, because that's what this lieutenant colonel is, he's coming in to be the specter, the ghost,
Right.
Death, perhaps even. But that there's even sympathy for that job.
Right. Right.
And luckily, because of John's experience working with the military,
Lots of veterans.
Lots of veterans
in our film as well.
do his performances in his theater pieces. And so we were able to interview a lot of people who had been in that role, walking up to the door.
Yes.
And knowing that you're always walking on a fine line of not knowing what you're going to find. So when he comes that final day, he doesn't know if he's going to find a woman who's murdered herself and her child, who has
a gun, perhaps,
who has a gun, who wants to harm them. There's all of these terrible case scenarios that are all part of the fabric
it
of
can
that
get
pattern.
it can get really ugly. And I think one of the commonalities between this and some of the other military pieces I wrote is that I'm hoping people have seen the short before they see this, but the twist at the end is everything works out.
Yeah.
We're so used to
that it works out.
Yeah, the surprise is it works out, or it gets them to the next beginning, at least.
Right. Yes, the next beginning is the perfect phrase.
Because we're so used to things going awful, and perhaps this would have been more in the line of a Sundance film if she had come out with a machine gun and mowed everyone down.
Oh God. Okay.
Right? No, I'm quite serious. I'm quite serious,
Yeah,
but that's not what we're going to do.
Yeah. One thing I don't want to. There's so many questions I have for you, but talk to me about your soundtrack and your choices. The 50s music in the beginning, the wonderful chimes or bells that go off in her head when she's dancing with insanity. Just some wonderful, wonderful choices in music.
There's been so many moments of synchronicity with this film, and I just think the film angels were looking out for us. Finding the right sound people, A, to record while you're filming, and B, to do the post, is not always an easy feat. And the irony is that I called it's all relationships. I called my sound mixer from Desperate Housewives, who lives in the Bay Area, which is close to where we were shooting, and I asked if he was available, and he said no, but I have this protege that I've been working with, who's the son of a very famous film sound editor from Skywalker Ranch, and he's been working on this show called 13 Reasons Why, and maybe you can get
my goodness.
It's actually a really wonderful sound mixer for set. So I hired him, and during that week I ended up getting a role on 13 Reasons Why. So there was that synchronicity. And then when we went to our post, because we were filming up in the Bay Area to work on season 3 of 13 Reasons Why, his father, who was retired, ended up doing our post-production sound.
Who's also a legend at Skywalker Ranch.
It could not have worked out better. And we ended up sitting in his home studio in the back of his house in Goleta, and got regaled with the most wonderful mix of energetic and
the guy's worked with Coppola. He's worked with all the greats. And
so was he the one that came up with the bell sound, or
he offered the bell sound as a possibility? We were trying to find a way to auditorily reflect where she was going.
She was at, yes.
Because we weren't trying to hit it on the nose visually. You saw her kind of distance, and we did some mixed things with focus, so that I could kind of show you when she was in and when she was out. But it was really John who I was working on 13 Reasons Why. And so John ended up spending a lot of hours with Lou.
Technically, I was a sound supervisor,
Yeah.
so a lot of the musical selection, music is very important. You're listening to the music I was listening to when I wrote it. Because I'm in that sense, maybe I'm a cheater that way, I don't know, but I find the music at the same time I'm finding the words for the scene.
Right.
So the music's right at the beginning. As far as the sound effects, working with Lou and then Andy Wiskus, they're both amazing guys. And Andy is the dad. And we just sat shoulder to shoulder, and I thought it would just take a couple of days. We ended up taking like 3 weeks to do the sound on this, and it was a clinic.
But you can tell, it's so superb.
He did a beautiful
I'll
mix.
never look at it the same way again. I'm such an audiophile anyway, but then after that, forget about it. We love our dog so much. We even put the dog in the soundtrack. Yeah.
So
I see we're almost getting close. We're almost getting close to the end. I mean, I'm going over, but one last question and then we'll have to cut. Acting, as we both know, delusional is probably one of the hardest things that you can do.
Mm-hmm.
So what were some of the challenges? And you had a brilliant actress, obviously. What were some of the challenges in directing that?
Well, Scotty Thompson she's a wonderful actress. She played my daughter in an HBO movie. It was a Project Greenlight movie that we did together. And part of the reason I cast her was she and I had been kind of thumbnail sketched into that particular script. And there wasn't a lot of there, but she and I behind the scenes worked out our history and really found and carved out some beautiful emotional kind of depth and moments that brought those two characters to life. So I knew she would be the right detective for finding truth of this character and what she was going through. And I think part of, you're right, you can't direct someone to be that. But part of what helped was choosing where she should look and focus. And so one of the things that I instructed her to do, just as an exercise, was not to look at his face directly, but to take in kind of the insignia on his lapel and to kind of look at him as if he was someone that you've never seen before, as if it was just arriving to you, so that you're not listening to the words as much. So every time she would go, "I'm sorry," it's like she's coming back into a listening. So she's kind of tuned, just separate from reality. And there was an innocence and kind of an Americana about the time frame that we chose the music to be.
She's arrested
in that idyllic kind of American housewife. And so everything is fun, everything is good. And if you watch, for instance, Ozark, and you see Laura Linney, she's
spooky
dealing with the cartel, and she's like, "Hi."
Yeah.
There's the cover is what makes the insanity. When the situation is in contrast to what the person is dealing with, and then when she closes the door and you see that kind of fractured reality coming back of the memories trying to creep back in. One of the things about dissociative disorder is that memory is affected. And so you literally black out whatever has caused the trauma. And so it's the trauma trying to come back in. And then she covers it with, "No, I need to connect with my husband again." So it's really half in the writing, half in the music, half in the performance, and it all kind of collectively comes together to draw you in. And she has those transparent blue eyes that you just go, "Oh,
I know."
On there,
And working with the child, who was also quite wonderful. Was that challenging, or what, John? What?
So first of all, she'll never forgive me for giving her so many kids in a script to work with. That was number one, because she did a brilliant job with them, but that was a lot of children if you start to count how many were in there.
Right.
And also the lead child, we found them at a mall while they wanted to pet our dog.
Yeah.
Later on, the mom, Tamara, was so sweet. She and I were standing at Village one day while Brenda was directing the scene, and she goes, "Wow, that cardboard." that's just too weird for me. And I go, it's pretty crazy, right? And she says, yeah, we opted to get the pillow instead. Turns out they're in the program. And one of the things you can get is, instead of a life-size cardboard cutout, you get a
body
pillow of the serviceman for the child to sleep with.
So his father was stationed in Turkey.
And so the child is in the program. We didn't know until we're halfway through shooting. That's why it didn't seem so odd to them.
And the thing about directing children is, once they understand, they will do all the work for you. He just kept looking at the cutout going, that's not my dad. That's not my dad. And I finally was able to get him in the right frame of mind to say, well, what's your dad's name? And he told me his dad's name. And I said, and your name is Aiden? And he says, yes. And I said, well, what's your name in the story? And he said, well, my name is Dean. And I said, and so whose dad is that? And he goes, Dean's dad. And he goes, oh. And from that moment on, once he was in the reality of, oh, I'm playing Dean Jr., so that's my dad, but my dad is, he was able to improvise. And that little, when we shoved the cutout into the van and he goes, boop, on the dad's nose, you know, those are the magic moments that you can't write in a script, that just come to life when people are in the right frame of mind. They start to give you gold. So,
right. So when you chose the actor to photograph to be the dad, he's such a universal looking young man.
He's a
Marine.
He's a Marine. Okay.
I'm an actor, and John actually used him in one of his stage productions, Ajax in Iraq, and he played the heavy in that. And I thought he was wonderful. He
also the dad coming home. The dad coming home at the pizza parlor is also another Marine, Captain James Warland, who was also in that production.
It's just choosing that face that the audience has to fall in love with in the course of your 21 minutes. And then when you finally get to see him live, you fall apart in that last moment. You just, you know, I don't know how many times I've cried at watching that last scene. We were talking earlier about editing the film, and I'm wondering if the final product of the film is actually close to the final script.
Well, you know, they always say you have 3 movies. You have the one that is written, you have the one that you shoot, and then you have the one that you edit. And during the process of the editing, you know, we shot in a certain order, and then when you assemble the film, we assembled it based on the script. And I kept feeling organically like it wasn't quite moving in the way that I wanted it. That the film actually,
where did it start in the story?
Yeah, the story initially started with the cutout being brought to Sarah at the front door when she had her younger son. And then there was a time jump to the 3 years in the future when the son was now about 5. And then you get to see the neighborhood and the shopping market and all of that world. And I just felt like the movie started then. And so what I asked the editor to do was to not start the movie where the script did, but started in that halfway point and then flash back to find out when she got the cutout. And it just added so much more emotional depth for her seeing the soldier coming home and longing for that. And then you get to see when she initially gets the cutout.
Another brilliant thing that came about from her taking that little chunk and moving it to the front is you start out immediately in the world, driving through the base. You're a little confused and it looks a little like a Black Mirror episode, really kind of, mysterious as what is going on. And then the flashback explains a little more. So it did a great job from beginning to end of unfolding information. And that's why it made more sense to put the what this program is at the very end, so that you have a complete understanding by the time you've seen the whole thing.
Yes, yeah. But the breakup of the linear is incredible.
But those are the things you don't know when you're shooting it. You don't know that that's what's going to be required until you actually see the film assembled. And so, I'd always heard that adage of the 3 different films, and it was the first time that I actually had a visceral response to, oh yeah, They're right.
You know, and also I think it's really interesting just to point out that not only the difference between those three, but there's the script you read, right? And a lot of writers have to do this where they're making a reading script of their film so that the reader gets the full impact like they were seeing it on a screen. But that doesn't always work the other way around. Now you have to make the film to be a film. Right?
Right.
And then going back, you know, it's just an interesting, tricky thing, right? Perhaps starting where the film does in a script may have felt a little confused, even more confusing, right? But because film isn't always just the story, it's also about the presence and the universe you've created, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's harder to express on a page without it being a novel, without overdoing it on the action so that it flows. And yet, when you get into an editing room, you're like, oh yeah, we don't need that. How about we just do it over here? And that's such an exciting process.
Right.
I have to say, editing is one of my favorite things now. It really is. I enjoy the process, and it's working with rhythm and pitch and finding the right nuance of just when to cut so you don't interrupt the flow. And I thought, oh, this is so good. All of those years that I thought were wasted are actually
it's such a beautiful analogy, actually, because you know the science inside music, right? So the Beethoven. There's a reason why a majority of people start to tear up at the same spot in the same piece of music because it's just the right tone. It's like a bell being rung that hits you in your soul, right? And that's where the editing phase is. I mean, I've seen scenes just kind of thrown together and be so moving, and then when you get back in there and tinker, you just edited the emotion right out of it, right?
Right.
So it's again about hitting that right tone, and comparing it to music is, I think, a brilliant way to go about it.
Yeah, it's the ability to control frames. Timing is amazing.
Yes.
And, you know, and as an actor, you always say, why did I end up on the cutting room floor? But as a director, when you look at it from the director's point of view, it's like, oh, I understand. It was a totally different point of view. You know, it was the director's point of view.
That's where you get to conduct, you know. That's where you get to conduct the orchestra, is in that.
Yes.
You know, and you asked me earlier, Sheila, what had kind of prepared me for directing. And I didn't mention this, but, you know, I taught yoga for years. And as a yoga teacher, it's your job to provide the best class that everyone could possibly want, but you're dealing with so many different bodies with so many different histories. And in directing, it's kind of the same way, is you have this group of individuals and you have to know how to approach each one with what they specifically need in order for them to feel safe and like they can open so that they're not feeling imposed upon. But at the same time, you're giving them the freedom to then rise to what they need to be their own personal teacher. And so for me, that's the beauty of directing, is not about everyone doing what I want, but letting everyone have the right environment to then bring their best work to the foreground.
May I tell them what I
You're the director I always wanted to have.
One of the things, you know, Brenda, this is new to directing. I've been doing it for at least 15 years. But I've been doing it for the stage, which is like directing a long 2-hour take, a single take, right? And one of the things I encouraged her to do, and she does so brilliantly, and I just wanted to share it with whoever may be seeing this, is this. After all that time directing and working at Juilliard, NYU, I've worked in a lot of places that require you to kind of unpack what directing is, right? And once you get past all the craft and skill and things like people saying, you know, well, you want to do this in this situation, this, and now you want to use this lens. Once you get past the tech head stuff, the thing that makes you a great director has nothing to do with that. The thing that makes you a great director is who you are as a human being, your actual point of view of the world. So her superpower is going to be different than your superpower. And Brenda's superpower came from working on herself and being a yogi and understanding how to speak to students. And that's her superpower. So that's the way she's going to direct. She's going to bring the thing that is unlike anybody else to her directing very much like acting. You bring the part of you that's messy or really individual to you, and you bring it to the acting, and we go, well, nobody else could do it that way, because you are an amalgamation of your history, your understanding, your communication. And so Brenda is such a light in our community of friends. People do really come to her for help, advice, understanding the world, their body, everything so much better. They already do that anyway. So really, it's like, how would you speak to your friends you're giving advice to? How would you guide an actor? How you guide your friends? And that becomes your superpower. That becomes the way you'll direct like nobody else, because the lens you choose and everything else is academic. That is what's going to make you incredible. And I hope that everybody does that for themselves when they approach telling a story or doing something incredible in this unprecedented time where you actually get to do that. You know, and now it would take a lot more capital for me to direct one of my plays than it would be for me to make another short film, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you again. I mean, I think, John, I think you've described her perfectly, whether it's your acting or your directing. There's something very spiritual in your message. And thank you very much. Anyway, I just want to thank you both. It was lovely to meet you. It was lovely to talk to you. I hope one day we'll actually meet in person and have Chinese food in Vancouver or something.
Well, wonderful. And just so you know, doing this little short led to such beautiful things, because I ended up directing 2 episodes of 13 Reasons Why, season 4. And those will be coming out June 5th. So if people are excited by this short, I hope you'll turn into 13 Reasons Why and see.
We will.
Wonderful success story, in my opinion, of really following your passion, seeing a vision out, and then being rewarded for it with more work. So I hope that happens for all your filmmakers.
Yes.
Okay, I hope so too.
Can't wait to see everyone else's work. Thank you so much for having us.
Take care. All right. Bless you.